Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Noobster here, back with another Wonderlands build video for y'all. So what I got for y'all today is a Clawbringer Stabomancer build. And before we get into the video, if you guys do like the video, please don't forget to leave a like and sub to the channel. We're really trying to hit 1K as soon as possible, so I would really appreciate it. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's hop right into the build. So guys, this build is actually focused around the Stab-o-matic shotgun, and I know I'm late to the Stab-o-matic hype, but if you did not know, the shots on this gun actually do melee damage, so this allows us to use a bunch of different skills and have a lot of different interactions that we usually don't get to with gun-based builds, but with a gun itself. But the only downside being that we actually don't get those gun-based bonuses that we usually do. But anyway, it's still fun, and let's hop right into the skill tree and see what we're actually using. Alright guys, so hopping right into the skill tree. So for starters, with this build, you can use any action skill that you want. So each of them have kind of their unique benefit. Some are just more because I enjoy using it, but it's all based on personal preference. So Cleansing Flame, the benefit of this one, this is actually my least favorite action skill out of the bunch, but it does have its own unique benefit. So Cleansing Flame does fire damage, and if you guys did not know, the skill Awe here actually gives us bonus critical hit damage after dealing fire damage. So during a boss fight, if you want to initiate with Cleansing Flames, that is going to help proc Awe. And it may look like we don't have skills in Awe, but it's actually coming from our class mod itself. So that's where we get the benefit from Cleansing Flames. Storm Dragon's Judgment, it just does a little bit of long-range melee damage because you can just throw it out, forget it, or you can pull it back and get your action skill back really quick. That's the benefit of that. Next we have Ghost Blade. Ghost Blade is actually unique in that it just stays for a long time and it spins around this melee attack and just constantly procs melee damage, and that's useful for 1,000 cuts because whenever we do melee critical hits, which Ghostblade does do, that will actually give us more stacks. So that's a good way to also initiate fights. And then the last thing is just From the Shadows, which we all know is just a great action skill in general because we constantly land critical hits only, and it just gives us a whole lot of damage. So all four of those are actually usable, and if you basically want to use one or the other, it doesn't matter. They all have their own benefits and downsides. Storm Dragon's Judgment, the cooldown is very low if you just chuck it and call it back, but each of them can have their own specific benefit. Anyway, let's hop right into the skills themselves. So we'll start off with the Clawbringer. So the main important skill here is Oath of Thunder. So Oath of Thunder, whenever we deal melee damage, it's actually going to deal bonus lightning damage on top of our melee damage. And the bonus lightning damage here is 42%, but that's also because we have 2 extra points from our class mod itself. Next we have Radiance. Radiance is not too important, and the same goes with Dedication. Both of these sort of work hand in hand. I mean, they all have to do with our ward capacity and action skill cooldown rate. But to be honest, if you prefer using them elsewhere, you can. For now, this is what I've spec'd into because it does give us a little bit of extra survivability, and Dedication does help us get our action skill back a little bit quicker. And our last skill we have in our Clawbringer is Dragon Aura. Dragon Aura is just going to help us deal bonus elemental damage, so flat 25% with 5 points into this. And that's going to be helpful for our bonus lightning damage, some of our Buffmeister damage, and then also our body rune, which gives a little bit of fire damage. So the Stabomancer tree, we went 5 out of 5 in Arsenal. This is going to help us with our bonus melee damage as well as spell damage, and you'll see why spell damage is important in just a second. Next we have Haste. So Haste is going to give us increased movement speed, and that goes hand in hand with Swift Death. The faster we move, the more damage we deal. Next we have Nimble Fingers. So Nimble Fingers, whenever we deal melee damage, basically all the time with our Stab-o-matic, we're going to get bonus fire rate and increased spell damage, and you'll see why spell damage is important when we look into the inventory. And this has a duration of 8 seconds, but this is pretty much going to be constant because we're constantly going to be doing melee damage. Next we have 5 out of 5 in Sneak Attack. This is going to give us bonus critical hit damage. Next is Elusive. This is just so we can run while shooting. And this is just going to go hand in hand with Swift Death and Haste, because if we're running and shooting, we're going to be doing a whole lot of damage. And last but not least, we have 1,000 cuts. So 1,000 cuts, basically this is a stacking sort of skill here. Not honestly essential. I feel like if you do not want to go too far into 1,000 cuts, you could also put 3 out of 3 in all. You just have to distribute the skills the skills out a little bit. So for example, you can actually go ahead and max out Radiance and Dedication and proc it to honestly anything here works fine. I just prefer not wasting a lot of skills. But eventually when you make it into awe, you just want to put 3 out of 3 in there. But personally, I like this setup a little more. And I don't mind stacking up 1,000 cuts. It honestly helps with a little bit of extra damage because we get 1% per stack. So that is going to give us a flat 25% extra damage dealt. So that's just damage on everything we do. So increase our melee, our spells, whatever. So this is how I sort of spec into it. Now into our hero stats. So we maxed out critical hit damage. This is sort of essential on all builds, to be honest. Next, we maxed out our skill cooldown. This is so in case we are using any other skill here, so other than Storm Dragon's Judgment, they have a long cooldown. So you basically want to get it as fast as possible, so attunement will help with that. And then last, you can go ahead and spread it out. I put a little bit into Constitution, a little bit into Dexterity, but those are just free to play with, whatever you prefer. If you're dying a little too much, go ahead and put it into Constitution, but if you are not and are doing just fine, you can max out Dexterity, or I wouldn't recommend spell cooldown. I'll show you guys in just a second why, but you can go ahead and put it into status damage if you would like. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's hop right into the inventory itself. So, as I said previously, spell damage is important here, and that's because of this item here, the Spell Blade. So the Spell Blade actually scales our melee damage with our spell bonuses. So it actually makes us do a whole lot more melee damage, which is kind of weird, and I don't know if that's exactly how they wanted it, but that's sort of what the Spell Blade is supposed to do, and I guess that stacks onto the Stab-o-matic as well. And another benefit to the Spell Blade here is the enchant. So after getting a melee kill, we refresh 1 spell charge. You will be constantly killing enemies, so you will constantly have your spell charges up. This is honestly better than even the capstone for spell shot, in my opinion. It's just, you get this almost immediately. It's crazy. Next, we have our Stab-o-matics themselves. We have 2 different Stab-o-matics, and we have a Delusion. So the Stab-o-matics have the enchant on spellcast increase melee damage by 30% for 10 seconds. And the reason there's 2 of them, one is times 14 and one is times 7. The times 7 is better for mobbing because you want to make sure you have all your ammo. But then when you're just killing bosses, feel free to use the times 14 as that will kill the bosses a lot faster. But yeah, just a different scenario. Feel free to use both of them. Personally, I just like switching them around when I'm doing mobbing and bossing. Next, we have the Delusion. Delusion, this has specific uses, so it depends on what Buffmeister we're using. So if we're using the Dark Magic one, as you can see right now, then we won't really care to use the Delusion. You'll get a little bit of bonus, but it's honestly not that important. But if we do switch it over to a Shock Buffmeister, then yeah, the Delusion definitely does help. So just threw that into the build. It's a volatile. It doesn't matter. We just really care about the soaked effect that it gives. Next, we have a couple of mood rings. So we threw a couple of rings. We were trying out a bunch of different things. Some with spell damage bonuses, some with melee. And I personally think melee damage works better. And we have a couple of awesome mood rings. And both are ascended. And also, before I keep continuing, I want to give a quick shout out to Anenourmous Dab. He again helped me out with a lot of this gear. So huge shout out to him. He helped me get these mood rings, also the Stab-o-matics, and just a whole lot of things. So huge shout out. Thank you so much. So these are 2 mood rings that we're providing. They both are melee damage and they have melee crit hit damage bonuses. So honestly the same ones, but they are awesome and they help our damage a ton. Next we have a body rune. So the body rune, when you kill an enemy, you restore 15% of your maximum health, and on top of that, deal bonus 20% fire damage. All right, next we have our class mod here, which is a paradigm. So a paradigm basically scales other damage sources based on a single damage source. So for example, in this one, your ability damage and your spell damage are going to be increased by 35% of your melee damage. It honestly works really weirdly and it's hard to understand, but basically we're going to be doing a whole lot more melee damage with this. This one has 3 points in awe and 2 points into radiance. And this is Stabomancer and Clawbringer power. And as you can see, our passives on it are awesome with all damage dealt, melee damage, and melee crit hit chance. This is only a primordial, so if you do find an ascended version of these, holy crap. But again, this is a very difficult class mod to get just because it has amazing skill bonuses. It just works out perfectly for us. So next is the Universal Soldier. So this is the amulet that we use. So the Universal Soldier is basically going to give us 100% uptime on shooting our guns. We never have to reload with this because we're going to constantly be doing melee damage and we're just going to reload our guns instantly. But if you do want a slight bit extra damage or survivability, I would recommend either a Sacrificial Skeep or even a Harbinger with lightning damage and either Stabomancer or Clawbringer power. Doesn't really matter. But that's just going to give you a little bit of extra survivability, and on top of that, just a slight bit of extra damage. But the downside is you'll have to reload your guns quite often because the Stab-o-matics have a very, very small magazine size. So it's kind of annoying to me. I just prefer using the Universal Soldier. I never have to worry about reloading. All right, last but not least, we have our Buffmeisters. So we have a couple different Buffmeisters. We have some with dark magic damage, some with frost, and then some with shock damage. Honestly, the ones I prefer are the dark magic and the shock damage here. So for dark magic, that's what we'll mainly be using when we're taking a lot of damage, need a bit of extra survivability, and then shock is when we're going against bosses. It just scales our damage tremendously. And on top of that, the shock damage one is going to be when we actually use the Delusion here. So the Delusion is going to give us the soaked effect, and so the shock ones are just going to be a huge benefit to that. The dark magic ones, we don't really worry about the Delusion too much. And then the enchants we have on these, we have a couple of them with the Wild Ghostblade as active enchant. This is huge because it's going to give us increased melee crit hit damage and melee crit hit chance. So honestly, you just do a whole lot extra damage while Ghostblade is active. But if you want something generic, we also have some with on spellcast increased damage dealt. We have one with on action skill start increased damage dealt, but honestly, this is all down to preference. I sort of switch around a little bit, but we've given a couple of these in the build as well, and a lot of them are ascended. Just our dark magic ones are not, but honestly, it still does the trick, still does a lot of damage. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed the build, and I will be posting the save file in the Discord, so the link of that is going to be in the description below. Or if you are on console and don't have access to save files and all that, feel free to still join and just send me a direct message and I can hook you up with this gear. This gun works well with a bunch of different characters, so even if you don't want to use Clawbringer and Stabomancer, I would still recommend grabbing the save file, getting the gear from there, and just trying out and having fun with different characters. This build honestly works well with a bunch of different characters, or the gear itself, I mean. So yeah, just have fun with it and play around and see what you like better. But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please, again, leave a like, sub to the channel. I would really, really appreciate it. Hoping to hit at 1K as soon as possible. But with that out of the way, enjoy the rest of the video, guys, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.